He's there.
I don't see him. Okay.
All right, I
Hey.
can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
All right, I got, I think, Daryl, was that you that just spoke up?
Yes, sir. That's me, Sheriff.
All right, Wayne, you want to do a mic check real quick?
I can hear you very well.
All right, sounds like we're all set.
All right. Sorry for the delay. How you doing this morning, Sheriff Tony?
I'm good, my friend.
That's good. You're looking good. Looking like $1 million there this morning.
Oh, well, let me get out while I'm ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining the Adams Brothers podcast. We just want to ask you a few questions, if you
Sure.
would. And I'll start off. I'll ask you my first question is, how often does your deputies receive training for sensitivity, de-escalation, and public recording?
Yeah, well, currently the way things are structured here in the agency, they'll go through an annual training element that goes through like cultural awareness and sensitivity. But I can tell you, Daryl, we haven't done enough. And in fact, one of the big things I've been pushing out this year, when we finally got the rest of the chiefs on, is making sure we have racial equity and implicit bias training. When we all go through the academy, Daryl, there's like basic, cultural awareness, but it doesn't talk about the hundreds of years of discriminatory practices that impact Black folks in this community. Absolutely. So I committed $1 million yesterday to get this done, not just for us, but for every cop in this county.
Thank you. I like that answer there. And I spoke to you before on one of the local radio stations, and I told you that I like a lot of the things that you were doing at BSO, and I like that you have administrative team that looks like us and is diverse. And and I really like that what you're doing there at BSO, and it hasn't been done in the past.
Yeah, it's important, Daryl. I talk about this all the time. We have to look like Broward County, and some people would take that and say, there's a Black agenda. It's not a Black agenda; it's an equality agenda. We're playing catch up here. Absolutely. And when I came into this organization, I could have done what every sheriff done, bring their friends in and give them positions. But there's a lot of good, hardworking people here at BSO, and a lot of them happen to be Black and brown. So for the first time in 100+ years, we have the most diverse command staff. My undersheriff's a Black female. The key colonel running the Department of Law Enforcement, which have all the interactions. You all know him, is Colonel Holmes, David Holmes.
Yes.
Good folks who've been waiting their time to get a chance to lead. But you can't just diversify it at the top. We're also having to recruit and get more young deputies out on the road that look like Broward County, because that's essential too.
Wayne?
Yes, Wayne Adams, I wanted to ask you something too, Sheriff. Do you support open carry in the state of Florida?
Absolutely not. I think it's a huge issue for us to, here's a scenario I gave a friend of mine. We were talking about this thing. What's the necessity of walking around in Publix with an AR-15 rifle wrapped around you or a handgun on your hip? It only creates further alarm and conflict in the community. People looking at individuals with guns on their hip, the smallest conflict, we're going to have people start pulling guns out. It's the same reason I didn't want guns to arm our teachers. The day our teachers have to wake up in the morning and say, let me grab my lesson plan and my 357, we're lost as a society. Their goal is supposed to be teaching our kids, not worrying about killing them. So open carry, that may work in Texas. It most certainly won't work here in Broward County.
Okay, thank you. Also, the curfews that was implemented by Broward County, do you think those curfews was necessary?
For the riot or for the pandemic? For like
now, doing the uprising.
Yeah, we put it in place when I talked to the county administrator just to get things balanced out and bring some of the pressures down. When Black Lives Matter came out here with Jasmine and her group, and they had their protests over at the in Fort Lauderdale, it was perfect. There was no problems. But there was a small group of agitators out there who stirred it up and created problems and put people in harm's way. So we needed to make sure we looked at all these different threats that were coming up in terms of who was protesters, who was agitators. So when Bertha put the restrictions in, one of the things I communicated with all the chiefs is, hey, how long is too long? Because people need to get back to normalcy. And we also don't want to start, impacting people's ability to go out and protest because of a small, pocket of problems. So I think she released it just yesterday or the day beforehand. And I think we'll be fine. I don't think we're going to have any major issues at this point.
Okay. Also, do you think that the sheriff department is giving out enough contracts to, and I'm not going to use the word minority, I'm going to say specifically African American. Yes, Black folks. I like to use that word. I don't like to use the word minority because minority can mean a whole bunch of groups. I specifically concentrate on Black folks.
Yep.
Do you think the sheriff department is giving out enough contracts to Black folks?
I can tell you I've looked at kind of the last 10 years of what our vendor list looked like for all our different needs. And also things that we've done even with our law enforcement trust funds. And the answer is no, a definitive no, we have not. And that's part of my efforts here is to bring balance in that. One of the biggest projects we have coming up, we broke ground on a $30 million training center. And I made a commitment working with Mayor Honas that we would ensure that at least small Black businesses would have an opportunity and committed to roughly 30% of that. So that's $10 million that's going to have an opportunity for Black businesses to engage and solicit some of these funds. So, and I don't shy away from what you're saying, partner. I understand it. There's minorities and then there's Black folks, and
that's right.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to make that very clear because a lot of people always asking, do Black folks get enough contracts through the sheriff department and other Broward agencies? And also another follow-up question to that: do the sheriff department advertise a lot with Black media? Because I hear people in Black media throughout the county and the state saying that they don't get enough advertising through the sheriff department for Black media, and which I know it's not a whole lot of Black media now, but do you, and if so, do you know of any Black media that gets advertising?
Yeah, you're spot on. We have not, from an agency standpoint, really pushed out into Black contracts, papers that are here, like the West Side Gazette, Caribbean National Weekly, and several others. They just haven't been given a business opportunities. But since I've been in here, I've been making sure we are publishing and putting more content out into those papers because, look, if the Black press dies, then we don't have a voice.
That's right. Right.
So,
and I know, I'm sorry.
No. So it's been an initiative of mine. I've been working with Bobby Henry over at West Side Gazette, Hugh Ferguson over at Caribbean National Weekly, and making sure that when we have content that needs to be put out into the community, into the Black community, that we're actually utilizing those papers and media that touch us the most, because the Sun Sentinel doesn't really expand into the particular Black communities as much as it does in the white communities.
Right, because I know my mentor, Mr. Lucius Gant, for years I read his columns where he was always like saying during political times, no one advertised with Black media. And over the years, I always said that was a problem that needs to be taken care of. And okay, you answered my question there.
Okay. We're talking to Broward County Sheriff Gregory Tony here on the Adams Brothers podcast. In Deerfield Beach, where we live, there's been a number of shootings and killings, and some of them have to this point has been unsolved. I don't believe any arrests have been made. I think several of the murders are still open. So my second question to you is, will you put money in the budget for spot shotters in Deerfield Beach?
Well, spot shotter, let me talk, most people I don't even know what that is. Just to give you an overview, when you're talking about spot shotter, it's basically a technology-based system that gives an alert for where the projections are for where shooting happened. So when gunshots fired, it activates and it kind of narrows down where the shot came from. Right there, we're talking the same thing, just want to make sure your viewers understand it.
Yes, sir.
So from a budget standpoint, the city in Deerfield, if they want to introduce that into it, I won't oppose it. But the city has to contract and look at what their finances are for what they want to introduce in the city. I will tell you, having looked at some of those systems, I think Miami Gardens launched it several years ago.
Riviera Beach.
And Vieira Beach, yeah. If you look at what the data was showing for them, for the amount of money that was being spent in it, I don't know if Deerfield would get their bang for their buck, no pun intended, but I don't think they would see the cost benefit for investing in it. But if they did, we would support it.
Right, because I did bring that up, and I met with Chief Brimlow and Adam Hoffstein. Yep. I met with them and Colonel Holmes, David Holmes, and that conversation came up. And we think that spot shotters would be a good thing in Deerfield Beach, because I am active in my community, and whenever I hear gunshots, I call it in. And I had an unfortunate incident that I was involved in. I think you pretty much know. Where I called in some gunshots, and then I had the deputies come to my home, and it ended up in a good meeting. You know, it was a teaching experience for all of us, and we all got some very positive things out of it. And
I told you, I read your letter. We talked about it.
Yes, you did. You did.
We put all the things in place. And just so you know, I don't know if the last time we talked to Captain Brimlow over there in the district, but you know, when we saw those shootings occur, we sent out all our advanced teams, like our Viper team, to go track down. And we actually did have, I think, 2 arrests on shooting suspects that were involved in Deerfield. So we haven't got them all, but we're still out there working, still pushing the effort to, you know, apprehend these guys out here creating harm. But we had some success.
Okay. Right.
Yes. Broward County is mostly the people that run it, the commissioners, and a lot of people in a lot of elected positions are Democratic. Sheriff, why do you think we're seeing so many problems across this country dealing with shootings of Black people, dealing with systemic racism? How come you think that is when most of the cities and a lot of the cities are Democratically led?
Wow, that's a deep philosophical question. I will tell you this, when it comes to law enforcement officers' encounters and killing young Black folks in America, I think that's what we're really streamlining down to.
Right.
We have a culture where this very uniform that I'm honored to wear has been used against us to oppress us as people and to take rights away from us. Let's not forget about the civil rights movements, where this very uniform was responsible for unleashing dogs on our folks, on my mother, my grandmother, right? The fire department that I'm responsible for, they unleashed their fire hose on our people. And so we come from a culture, as it is, where we're already tarnished and tainted with, we can't trust the police. And so for every time we have one of these incidents where, like in Minneapolis, where a Black man's brutally killed by the hands or literally the knee of a white officer, it creates a lot of conflict. And I continue to tell the community that accountability is one of the biggest things for us. If we don't hold people accountable, we're going to lose the public trust. But it's not just a matter of how many people can I fire. I'll fire every single deputy that violate the laws and abuse their powers. I have no problems with that. I'll fight the unions, and I'm already involved in that. But that is not the solution. That's a retroactive response to harm that's already been done. So how do we fix some of the social things you're talking about? I was talking to Mayor Honus about this a few days ago. It's no mystery as to why we have a higher volume of calls into the Black and brown communities out here. We have the lowest level of economic growth and stimulus. The monies aren't being put into the community. The job opportunities aren't the same, right? And so you compound all these issues that's been going on for over 100 plus years in this country. Of course, something's going to break. Of course, people's temperaments are going to roll out to where now they are topped out and they want to resort to protest, and some want to resort to violence. So from an institution standpoint, I have the ability, and don't let any sheriff tell you otherwise. Don't let them give you an excuse as to why they couldn't do something when they were here. You're a constitutional officer with $1 billion budget and 5,700 employees. You have a small army to do good in this community, and you have enough money to re-engage the community. I've already talked about building a BSO youth development program. I put aside $250,000 to start it. I think I'm going to get the county to match it, or at least get up to $1 million. We talked about the commission committing $1 million towards racial equity and implicit bias training, right? These are starts. I spoke to all the Broward County chiefs of police and got them together in one room and said, hey, what we do at BSO will work for the whole county. Let's get everybody on the same accord. But it's going to take a lot more than just law enforcement change and reform to pick people out of the slums and the gutters and the lack of education that often, impact Black people.
Okay. Do you believe in the narrative or the term black on black crime? Do you believe in that? Or do you buy into that?
It's black on black crime happens, but so does white on white crime. So does Hispanic on Hispanic crime. Crime is crime. And if you look at, I come from a more academia side with this, right? I was in grad school, I've been an adjunct college professor, I study this stuff. It's no different than any other population, right? Who do you surround yourself with? Who's your community? Right. So crime is going to happen amongst that particular populace that you are with. It's very rare where you have crime patterns where white people dive into with black and black into white. So when people start slamming and hammering and saying all this black on black crime, well, it's white on white crime and it's brown on brown crime as well.
And I believe the same, what you're saying too, because I believe people commit crimes or kill within their own proximity.
Correct, and that's your community.
That's always been what I believe, and I know that you usually hear that term black on black crime whenever a policeman is accused of misconduct, brutality, or murder, then you hear that term black on black crime. It's always pulled out as a narrative.
Yeah, it's applied as an excuse to focus on holding the officers accountable, right?
Right.
I've heard the same things that you've heard, right? Well, there's more black people kill black people on a daily basis in the communities all year long, only a few cops. It's inexcusable. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the oath that we take as law enforcement officers is about protecting and serving. It's not about looking at stats and numbers and viewing certain populations of the community any different than we would for anyone here. So I don't allow that to distract me. I've never allowed it in my entire law enforcement career because it's not new for me to hear that. Just because I'm the sheriff don't mean I didn't hear it in Coral Springs as the cop. It doesn't mean I haven't heard it in lectures and in different debates. But what this is going to come back down to is accountability, not excuses.
Yes. Okay. It's been a lot of tension in Pompano Beach. I'm sure you're familiar with that as well, with Deputy Ron Thurston. So my question is, why was Deputy Ron Thurston disciplined for speaking out about the lack of minorities in different divisions within BSO?
We currently have BSO social media policies that apply to everyone. Unfortunately, this has turned into, let's focus on one individual employee, whereas we had more than one employee violate this policy and resulted in them being sat down, talked to, interviewed with internal affairs to make sure that we're holding people accountable. It's not about Ron Thurston. It's not about Michael Rubik. It's not about anyone else. It's about the policies we have in place in this organization and being fair and balanced. The one thing I refuse to do is allow for policies and relationships and someone's skin color to determine whether or not they get fair and equitable justice in this agency. It's the exact fight that we're having right now.
Right. And
so what you're going to do for one person, you better do it for everyone, and you better be consistent. So there was a lot of confusion about that. They said he was, I saw something that he was terminated. He hasn't been terminated. He's still getting paid. He's on restrictive administrative duty, just like our other deputies, and they'll be returned back to duty. But I hate that it's being used as a tool to distract from what we need to focus on. As far as diversity, you opened up with this. We have the most diverse command staff in 105 years.
Yes, you have.
We have more Black and brown deputies on the road and in the recruitment academies than we've ever seen. So I am not shy to speak on the issues of diversity and equality in this agency. I've been doing it long before Mr. Floyd was murdered. And you know that. You and I have talked and you've seen me on the news. So the voice is being expressed. But at the same time, we can't have our employees here take it upon themselves and dismiss policies.
Right.
Okay, so Sheriff, so with Mr. Thurston, Deputy Thurston, he was putting signs out. It didn't have anything to do with politics. his suspension, did it have any 1%, 2%? Did it have anything to do with, his politics or putting up signs on his own time, what you're saying?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have zero interest in tracking down people for their political affiliations, right? Not everyone is supporting Sheriff Gregory Tony, if you haven't noticed. What am I going to do? Go to war with everyone over that? I have too much on my plate to worry about that. Way too much. I'm still getting this agency through COVID-19, right? We're still in a worldwide medical pandemic. We've done a lot of good work where we instituted out working with Feeding South Florida, I think roughly 16 million pounds of food. I just dedicated another $100,000 to purchase 700,000 meals for Broward County. We're still strategically re-engaging or reinstituting normalcy in terms of businesses. We're going into phase 2. And then on top of that, Wayne, we get hit with one of the most negative impact police brutality cases to hit the face of this earth, because it is not just America. I'm sure you all are paying attention. It's in Amsterdam, it's in New Zealand, it's everywhere.
It's worldwide.
It's worldwide.
And we don't want to see that happen in Broward County ever.
No. And this is why I've had to terminate deputies for beating people in handcuffs. I've had to terminate deputies for slamming people's head down on the ground, because I knew if we didn't fix it, if we didn't manage it correctly and discipline these employees when they stepped out of line, we would be the first Minneapolis.
Because a lot of Black people in the Black community, they feel that when they've been a victim of police brutality, that the cop will just get a slap on the hand and nothing will ever happen to him. He'll be paid, put on a 2 weeks vacation or a month-long vacation with pay, and he'll be returned to duty. And we have seen this over and over again, and there has to be some police accountability. It has to be police accountability, because if you can't let them keep doing what's been the norm, they'll continue to do it.
Listen, ending police brutality starts at the top. It starts with who's the sheriff, who's making the calls. All the other excuses that you've all heard in this community for decades on end, it's not real. At the end of the day, an administrator, the sheriff of this organization, is going to have to make a decision for what's fair, what's right for this agency, and what's right for the community. Okay. And it takes a certain level of courage. Look, you all live here, you've tracked it. It hasn't been popular. Right? I've caught a lot of heat for doing these things, but if not me, then who? Who's going to step up and bring balance to this agency so that the people in the community that we're supposed to serve don't feel like they don't have a voice and can't trust us?
Absolutely. We have about 8 minutes. Wayne, we could get about 2 more questions in for Sheriff Tony.
Your timing is perfect. I got one more coming.
So go ahead, Wayne.
In the past, Sheriff, I have definitely myself experienced, just weeks ago, let me tell you about an incident weeks ago. It happened on 5th Court. I was sitting in my parents' house and I heard some shots, and I looked up and I seen some kids running. And I didn't call the police. Someone called them, because I wasn't for sure whether it was fireworks or was it, someone shooting. So moments later, I seen about maybe 15, 20 police cars coming. And I did see a guy come by the street flying. I mean, he was almost flipped the car where he was going so fast. And as they pulled up, some of the officers got out. This particular Black officer, he had an assault rifle. So I called him. I said, sir, and I called him, and, because I told him, I saw where the guys ran, and I seen a car. I had got a description of the car that came by, riding real fast like something had went on. And I called the guy. He told me, he said, come here. So I started walking to him. And me, one thing about me, I always have my hand in my pockets. And he raised the gun up at me like, sir, first thing you need to do is get your hands out of your pocket. I felt like I was the enemy. Right then, I said, you know what? To hell with you. And I turned back and walked back in my parents' yard. And I was just trying to cooperate and tell him exactly what I saw. But it was like his attitude, like he made me feel like the enemy, and I was listen and report what I saw. Tell the officers, because it was like about 20 converged over in the area. I mean, it was nothing like I had ever saw before. And it was just his attitude. And I called Commissioner Preston, and Commissioner Preston, said they were all under pressure. And, I'm tired of hearing that the police are under pressure. They have a high job, stressful job. You know, I just think a lot in moving forward with veteran things in the community across Broward County and across Florida would be, you know, de-escalation and how you get out and how you respond to a person and how you talk. Here I am, a 53-year-old man, and I'm walking up to him and I'm calling him, telling him what I saw, and it was like his attitude was like atrocious.
Yeah, did you talk to him afterwards? I'm curious. Like after the call was over?
The thing that got me, Sheriff, was it was another white deputy standing right next to him, and they both looked at me like almost like I'm some idiot. And the problem is, no one came over and asked me what happened, and I told them very clearly that I saw what happened. I was sitting there, I saw the guys running. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know, like I said, whether it was fireworks or what. But the thing is, no one came over and asked me what I saw, even though I was upset at how he had his gun and how his voice tone was at me. No one still, at least he could have told someone, you know, that, hey, this guy has some information. No one came over there. So
I'll tell you, that's one of those things where we always have to improve on, you know, because the last thing we want to do is leave an image of we don't care about the community. And look,
that's how I feel.
I understand. I've been there. I've been that guy where I've had to jump out the car with the rifle because there was a shooting call and you don't know what you're dealing with, and you're trying to find the bad guy, and you're heightened. Your heighten's up. But you have to come down and explain to the community that you're engaged with. Those people you say, hey, go back in the house. The people you say, get out of the way. When you're done, you have to take a moment and come back and say, hey, sir, sorry I was heightened up, or we were looking for a guy with a gun. Do you know anything? Did you hear anything? Those are little fundamental skills that go a long way, because I guarantee if they would have done that, you'd have had a different impression.
And they might would have caught the assailants that day.
Right. That's right.
But no one never came to this day. And I sent an email to, I think, Hoffstein or
Adam Hoffstein.
I never received a call back, and I just sent an email just asking them to call me. But I did call Deerfield Commissioner who represents my district, Ben Preston, and I did explain it to him what had happened. So I asked him to seek further, to at least look farther into it, and for someone at least to come talk to me. And still to this day, no one never came and talked to me. So I don't know whether he followed up on it or what.
I'll make sure I talk to Captain Brimlow down there and explain that we had a conversation, how that went out. No one even has gotten back to you yet. Just on a personal note, I don't like the way that ended, and we'll make sure somebody follow up with you.
All right, Sheriff Tony. Final question before we run out of time. Talk directly to the people of Broward County and tell the people of Broward County why we should re-elect you as Sheriff of Broward County.
Well, thanks for the opportunity for that. Look, Broward County, for those who are paying attention, I came into this organization during a time of chaos and controversy. It was one of our nation's worst school shootings, and I had to come in here and fix all those systematic and institutional failures. And that was quite easy to do. Introducing the state-of-the-art training, reinvested millions of dollars to build a real-time crime center to safeguard our schools. Now we track 256 schools, all 10,000 cameras, broke ground on a $30 million training center. I gave the men and women the best raise they received in 25 years. We now have the most diverse command staff in the history of the agency, including having our first Black female undersheriff, department heads that are Hispanic and Black. We're hiring and recruiting into our community, giving people an opportunity. We're reinvesting millions of dollars into safeguarding and doing things that this community has cried for a long time, including the racial equity and implicit bias training. We're leading up on how we should be treating our people. But here's the thing. For all the things that we have done in the last roughly 18 months, Daryl, in my administration, we've planted seeds, and those seeds have to grow. We can't afford to have this system return back to where it was in the past. You can't roll the dice and hope that somebody else is going to continue on this path of where we are much more physically responsible for what we're doing. We've introduced more community programs that matter. We're doing everything that we can for both the Black, brown, and white communities. We're not wasting money. I've taken out the politics of this office, and it hasn't been popular in Broward County. I've taken out the politics, and I've gotten us back to where we're focused on public safety. If the community wants to continue to see us on a path of progress and move forward, then I would say I have had a track record of doing things in 17 months, not years, 17 months, which hasn't been done in 50 years.
30 seconds.
And so I tell the people to look at the track record, look at the performances and what we've done, and rest assured that I will continue to take us on their path so long as they would select me to be their sheriff.
Well, we were talking to Sheriff Gregory Toney. He's the sheriff of Broward County, Florida, and he is seeking re-election in August of 2020 in the primary, I believe it is.
August 18th.
August 18th, yes. So, Sheriff Toney, thank you so much. Thank you very much for stopping by and taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to the Adams Brothers podcast. And we wish you the best of luck in your bid to be reelected as sheriff of Broward County.
All right, gentlemen, we'll do it again. Thanks for the invite.
Will.
Thank you.
Yes, we will.
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
You got it. Bye.
Bye-bye.